I'm Lindsey Parry from CoachParry.com, and today we're going to talk you through how to run a super fast half marathon. We're going to unpack everything you need to know. I'm going to hand you over Shona. She's going to kick things off. Enjoy.
So when you're jumping into a PR or a PB attempt, the first thing that you need to look at is setting the right goal, right? Ideally, and obviously, we want to set a goal that is feasible for your level and your ability, and feasible for where you are now. So let's use an example of this. Let's say that your goal is a sub 2-hour half marathon, and so you then decide, okay, actually I'm going to jump onto a sub 1:45 half marathon plan, because if I train harder and faster, I'm really just giving myself that buffer because I'm training for 1:45, so I will get to the 2-hour on race day. What that's going to mean is that when you're in your training now, you're probably not going to be training at the correct intensity. Your paces are probably going to be a little bit too fast in your easy and long runs, and your paces in your interval sessions are going to be too fast for you to actually get to those as well. Another risk with setting a goal that perhaps is a little bit too overreached is that you're probably setting yourself up to fail and not actually attempt and get to that PR, but really putting yourself at risk of injury as well. You're going to be training and overreaching and pushing so hard in every single session that you're going to be putting your body under so much stress and perhaps could really be at a higher risk of injury by overreaching for that goal. So we really need to make sure that we're setting a feasible target for this PR so that your training that you're doing right now is in the right sort of place.
So we talk about getting the training plan right and the kind of sessions right in terms of getting this PR. However, you can train as hard as you want, as much as you want, but if you're not getting the recovery right, you're going to struggle to hit that PR goal. The recovery is absolutely important. We talk about recovery, and I'm not just talking about rest and sleep. Those are probably one of the biggest key pillars to recovery, is your sleep and your nutrition and getting that angle right. But it is also about making sure that the structure of that training plan that we've spoken about has the correct recovery between those days, making sure that you are doing your easy runs easy enough so that you are recovering well enough before potentially taking on interval sessions and more higher intensity type sessions. You want to make sure that you are as fresh as possible to give everything that you need to give and get out of that training session, as well as the recovery week. So we talk about the different periodization of the plan and where we structure in recovery weeks. Those weeks are absolutely key to make sure if we're running a time trial, if you're running a warm-up race, for example, leading up to the ultimate PR, you want to make sure that you're as fresh as possible. That goes into the race week itself to make sure that we are recovering well enough between each of those sessions and coming up to race day. One of the real telltale signs of whether or not you are recovering well enough, I mentioned hitting those interval sessions or higher intensity sessions. If you find that you're getting to those sessions regularly and you're just absolutely flat, you just feel that you're struggling to hit the paces that are required for that session, that's a really good example or good indication that you are not recovering well enough. You should be absolutely fresh and ready to take on those training sessions. How do we know we've recovered? We use some simple tests. We like to use a pretty subjective test that we refer to as the stair test. If you walk up a flight of stairs and you get to a top of flight of stairs that you are used to walking every day, and you get to the top of that flight of stairs and you just feel that your legs are finished and you've got no energy left, that's a really simple example and indicator to say, you know what, I don't think I'm quite recovered yet to take on the next training session. There are then the other tools where we talk about resting heart rate, seeing elevated resting heart rates, using tools like heart rate variability. All those sort of tools are other really good indicators for us to be able to monitor that recovery and see how ready we are to take on the next training session.
Strength training. This is the little known secret. I think some people know that it's kind of important, but really strength is so important to help you become a better runner and to avoid injury so that you can get through those harder periods of training. But if you get stronger, that will improve your running economy, which will literally translate into seconds per kilometer, and we do that by creating a much more stable base when you are in your stance phase or when your foot is on the ground. So there's no collapsing of your hips, everything stays nice and strong. You've got a more stable base for muscles to contract off, and very important, there's no wastage of energy while you are sagging in, where there's ducking in of the knee or your hip starts to come in. Then we first have to pull ourselves properly upright and then propel ourselves forward. And that is where the magic in strength training and performance lies. The good news is we've put together a free strength training plan for you. You can click on the screen right now, download it, and get started.
Another key aspect to getting towards this half marathon PR is nutrition. So often overlooked. So 2 aspects, in training and race day. And very often people only think about race day and they don't do anything in the build up, in the times where you're putting your building blocks towards getting towards this PR. And so key things here is pre-nutrition and post-nutrition, okay? Post-training and pre-training nutrition. So before training, we want to ensure that we are giving our body the fuel that it needs to do what we're asking it to do. If you were going on vacation, you wouldn't just get in your car and drive and not worry about the fuel that's in your tank. You are going to fill up your tank in your car before you go out on your vacation. And so the same thing is true for your body. You want to give the body the fuel that it needs in order to go out and do that long run or that interval session, so that we're really allowing or giving our bodies the best chance to get the maximum benefit from that session. Post-training nutrition is absolutely vital as well. So you have now utilized muscle glycogen, all sorts of substrates and different aspects within physiologically while you're training. And so we need to replenish that. We need to make sure that once we've depleted the system in training, we put back into it again. And so that post-training nutrition is absolutely vital. We want to have some carbohydrate protein mix after a training, and that ratio is 4 carb to 1 protein, and that's really key to help with muscle resynthesis and replenishing that muscle glycogen that was used during training. If we don't do that, what tends to happen is that we're depleting our system in training, we're not refueling, and so we're just constantly living in the state of what can eventually become something like low energy availability. And this really is going to affect your recovery. You're not going to get maximum benefit of your muscles building up again and getting strong again, and therefore not getting all the benefit of your training. Longer sort of effects of not recovering properly can be things like risk of injury, not actually getting the goals and the times that you're looking for, because we're not focusing on really getting this nutrition right in training. The other aspect that we really need to focus on is your on-race day nutrition, right? Half marathon is always going to require that you are taking fuels in during, right? Unless you're absolutely speedy and running these half marathons in world record times, those athletes are still taking in some sort of fuel because they are running at such a high intensity. Even though it's probably around an hour or just less than, they are still taking in some sort of fuel to get them through that half marathon. For us recreational runners, you're inevitably running hour 20 plus, and so you definitely are requiring to have some sort of fuel to get you through that half marathon. Ideally, you want to be having some kind of breakfast to sustain you for the first 45 minutes or so of your race, and then from there we will require at least a minimum of 30 grams of carbs every hour thereafter. So whether that takes form of a liquid or a gel or a bar, you want to ensure that you're getting that on race day. Key here though is nothing new on race day, so we're jumping back to training nutrition. We want to practice all of this in our long runs so that we know that our body responds well to it.
So we've spoken about the various components, so nutrition, strength training, getting the plans right, getting your recovery right. But now it's a case of putting that all together and how consistently can we do it. When we talk about consistency, I'm not talking about you getting out of bed in the morning and going for your run. As runners, we are generally well disciplined and we make sure that we go and we get those sessions done. I'm talking about consistency in putting all of that together week in, week out, month in, month out, and putting training blocks on top of training blocks. Ideally, we want to be doing everything right all the time. However, we are human, we all have lives. We do understand that that's not always the case. It is important to try and do most of the things right most of the time. If we can put our training blocks on top of each other and keep layering, that we're not missing sessions because of injury, because we haven't recovered well enough, because of illness, for example, and we're not missing big chunks of training for 6 weeks at a time or 3 weeks at a time, it allows that consistency to keep building, to keep progressing. And if you imagine building a wall and you're building bricks and layers on top of each other consistently, that wall is a much stronger structure. And that's ultimately what we're talking about when we refer to consistency and making sure we're putting it all together as often and as much as possible.
We really need to be constantly reassessing our progress through our plan leading up to this PR attempt, right? So depending on what sort of plan you're following, it may be a 12-week or at most a 16-week plan, and you really want to constantly be checking that you're on track for this goal, right? It doesn't help that we just start the plan and just really kind of hope that we're going to get to the PR. Constantly assessing where we're at so that we can make changes to that training plan. The key thing here, or one of the really key things, and one of the biggest mistakes people do, is that they're constantly trying to check their fitness in every single session, and in particular in their long and easy runs. They're constantly trying to go, okay, I'm getting fitter. And inevitably then you're running your easy and your long runs a little bit too fast, okay? And so what we recommend, or what I like to do is rather put in a time trial or some sort of assessment every 4 weeks. So you take that pressure off yourself trying to get faster in every single session, and you can have a pre-training program time trial in 4 or 3 to 6 weeks time, do another time trial. So you really want to perhaps, rather have some kind of measure of performance as opposed to measuring yourself in every single run. So you can have a pre-training program time trial, and then perhaps every 3 to 6 weeks from there another time trial, depending on what sort of plan you're on, and that's going to be the measure of how you are improving or not improving on your training plan. And from there, you will then make changes for the following training block, whether you've improved or not improved on that time trial, as an example. These time trials are quite indicative of many things. So obviously, if your time is getting faster, you're improving, right? But if your time is getting slower, or there isn't actually a lot of difference from time trial 1 to time trial 2, it could be an indication of that you're not recovering correctly. And Dev has touched on that in this video a little bit earlier, but we really want to make sure that we're having a constant feeling around how are we feeling in our training session. Are we constantly tired? Because if we are feeling constantly tired throughout the training, we really need to reassess where we're at, because perhaps you're then not recovering enough, and as Dev has mentioned, you're not necessarily going to get to that PR attempt in the long term.
Finally, we're moving in towards race day. So often I see people do the training right, get themselves in great shape, and they ruin it all on race day. The key to getting it right on race day is reminding yourself what your goal is, making sure that that goal is realistic and achievable. Then you have to plan, how am I going to go about executing the race so that I can achieve that goal? And then very importantly, you need to stick to your plan. Plan your race and race your plan.
So now you know everything that's required to go and run that PR. Go out there and smash it. We'd really love to know how you do. If you're interested in getting any structured help and getting a training plan, maybe working towards that PR, check the link on screen now. If you got value out of this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel to get future content, and check out some of the other videos on screen now.